Good morning. Happy Thursday morning. I want to welcome everybody to our webinar. It's being hosted by the Ohio LTAP Center, but your presenter is actually from the New York LTAP Center, also known as the Cornell Local Roads program. It's my colleague David Orr, and he's going to be discussing selecting the right pavement preservation, roads in jeopardy. So before I turn things over to David, just a quick housekeeping item. In the go-to webinar box, you should see a questions box. And if you wouldn't mind dropping your questions in there, we would greatly appreciate it. Those questions will be shared with David whenever he stops and asks for them. So throughout the presentation, anytime you have a question, just go ahead and put it in there. And David, I believe that's all I have. So I'll turn things over to you.
I think so. I'm just making sure I got everything set, and we'll get started here. We are going to be using a tool called Pole Everywhere. Similar to the Mentimeter you've probably seen on some Ohio LTAP sessions. So you can go to poleev.com / David Orr PE. That's just my name with the PE behind it, to play around with this. You can download the app if you prefer. You can get it on your phone. Again, it's very similar to Mentimeter. It's a little different, but hopefully we'll have fun with it, because that's my goal today, is to help you pick up something. So at the end of the day, you'll have learned something, and we'll all have learned something together. Now, to help me get started, to know who's here, Victoria sent me a nice list of the attendees, but I got a couple of quick questions for you. So this also will help you learn how the Pole EV system works. So again, you can go to poleev.com / David Orr PE, and that will take you right to where you need to be. You could text it if you prefer, but a couple of these answers you'll need to type something, so it's actually easier to go to the website or download the app. And let's see, who do you work for? Okay, so let's get a sense if people can get that in there. And that helps me quite a bit. And I think what I will do, gotta find my Q&A pod. Where's my Q&A pod? I've got my chat pod. I thought there was a Q&A pod. It's always, each tool has its own things.
I'll give it to you, David. I have to bump you up to organizer status.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I'm still waiting for people to put in who they work for anyway, so make sure it's active here.
You should have your Q&A now too.
Okay, cool. That's good. Thanks. Yeah, for some reason, nobody is putting anything in, so I don't know why.
I was in there and it looked like it had the map up.
Yeah, the map, well, it should be active to I work for. So let me just see something here. Make sure everything's logged in properly. Because what I don't see on here is my activation thing. So I'm wondering if somehow something's being persnickety, because it was working this morning when I logged in. So.
Well, we can always ask people to just drop it in the question box.
We can always just do it to put it in the question box. Yep.
Yep. Some people have done that already.
I see that. Yep. Let's just try going to the next one and see what happens there, because that is just bizarre, Victoria.
Yeah, on my smartphone, it's saying that it's waiting for the presentation to begin.
Okay. So I don't know why it's doing that. So let me just go in here.
But while you're doing that, we have lots of folks who are saying that they are local government.
Yep, I figured that.
We have Central Ohio, Steubenville. It's out on the far east side of the state. City Clayton over on the western side.
Oh, okay, cool.
Lorraine, Upper Arlington. That's here in Central Ohio. City of Cincinnati. We got Middletown. It's down by Cincinnati. Huron County, Norwalk. It's up by the lake. City
Okay.
of Piqua. So yeah, we're getting great diversity from all over the state.
Well, that was the whole
Oh,
idea of the map, but
we even have a person who's joined us from Monroe County, Michigan. That's great.
wow.
Okay.
Okay, let's just see one last thing here. I got the dots, but they're
Yeah.
not showing up on the
On the screen.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That is just bizarre. So I'll tell you what I will do, because I can. Computers being what they are,
Oh, there you go.
I can do it this way.
Great.
I have no idea why it's not showing up inside the PowerPoint, but you can get a sense where people are from. So very odd. So they're all over the place, and that's good to see. So a lot of parts of Ohio, we have obviously a few folks. We have a couple of folks from New York here, and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So, okay, cool. And I have no idea why she's decided to do that, but we'll make it work. Okay.
Wait a minute. My favorite response just came in. This person is working for the weekend, just like the band Loverboy.
There you go. Well, everybody has to do something. So working for the weekend is a fine thing by me. So we're going to have a little fun here. We actually have a game show we call Who Wants to Be a Highway Superintendent, because that's what we call our county engineers here in New York. And well, when you see the symbol, that's when there's be a question. Now we'll see if Poll Everywhere decides to work. If not, we'll just make it work with the Q&A. So we'll play it by ear, or I'll drag it back down and go from there. There are worse things in the world than having to play with technology. More important than anything else is if you guys pick up a couple of things, then I've had myself a good day. So in terms of what roads look like outside of cities, they look like the picture here a little over 100 years ago. And when we talk about pavement preservation, a lot of people like to talk about pavement preservation with long, complicated definitions. My favorite definition by far is the one from the National Center for Pavement Preservation. And they talk about the right treatment at the right place at the right time. Now, you could also use that same definition for asset management, truth be told, for a lot of things that we do. And a lot of people like to put pavement preservation into a fairly narrow category of, just maintenance activities. But one of the things that we've seen as we go around, not only New York State, but other states like Ohio, is that really we need to talk about the whole spectrum of work that we do, everything from doing nothing to total reconstruction, because better to pick repair that isn't quote unquote preservation and do it well than to put repair that isn't the right one in the wrong location and having it fail. And so we're going to have a little bit of fun choosing the right repair, and we'll talk a little bit about what is and what isn't preservation. But the thing about the right treatment is you let the road tell you what needs to be done. You fix the disease. You don't fix, just cover it over. So that's what you got to be doing there, okay? So now I'm going to pull the question thing out here a little bit larger so I can see it easily. Okay, perfect. So just as I illustrated, again, I was planning to use the Q&A for this one, the question box for this one. What kind of repair might you do on a road like this? What kind of repair? So again, this is one I would like to see in the Q&A. What would you do? Let's see what people think. Some people would do patching. Okay, yeah. That's spray patch. A mill and overlay. approximately maybe the 24-inch band, right? Come in here and mill out a strip, like when my pen wakes up here. Now let's make sure the pen's working. Yeah, there we go. Mill out a strip, fix that strip. Okay, that's a possibility. Yeah. Patching with a cape seal, full depth repair, grind and patch, overlay, a huge number of choices. And that's the challenge, obviously, from a photograph. But the key here that I want you to be thinking about is what's causing the underlying distress. Usually that's where we need to focus our repair, is the underlying distress. What's causing that cracking in the first place? If we can figure that out, we can probably pick the correct repair. I happen to know this road. It's not too far outside of Ithaca. And the real problem here is actually the fact that we're on a side hill situation and the road goes in, and I'm going to change my pen color because it'll work better that way. And for some reason, my computer has decided today to be slow, but that's okay. We'll make it work. This is a side hill situation, and the road actually goes from a cut over here to a fill over here. And what we're seeing, that cracking actually is fairly close to the interface between the cut and the fill section. And the real problem is a combination of that and the fact that there's water coming in from the side. So the first thing I would want to make sure is to cut off any kind of water coming from the side and keep the water out of it. Okay. So again, we need to look at the road, let the road tell us what needs to be done. And of course, what we really care about is, does the road last long enough? So why do roads fail prematurely? Why don't they last as long as they should? These are all very important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And if we can get that right, we're probably going to be in pretty good shape. So that's something we just need to be aware of, keep in mind as we're going forward, as we're looking at it. So why do roads fail? Well, typically because of one of four reasons. They either have a problem with the design, the construction, the materials, or the preservation, or the maintenance, if you want to use maintenance instead. And design isn't just about brand new roadways. It could be about selecting the proper repair. Construction isn't just about putting in base and paving it and curbs and gutters and all that, but it's how do we construct the patch? How do we do the chip seal? Materials, do you have the right material? Does it meet the specification? And of course, the maintenance, the preservation, do we actually do it? Politically, sometimes we want to save a little bit of funds, and right now, no budgets are tight. But generally, when you think about premature failure, it's because of one of these four factors. And the one I would like to focus on is making sure we understand what the repair is actually going to do. This is not, I hope anybody would think, this is not a candidate for an overlay. And yet that's what this particular township was going to do, or town, for those here from New York. They were going to overlay this. And it's certainly not a good example of a place where you would want to do any kind of overlay. It really needs to have a rehabilitation or a reconstruction, a full depth reclamation, something like that. And of course, the only way you really know is to test it, see what's underneath, test the material, and find out. So let's go through. We're going to have a little bit of fun for the next 45 minutes or so. So again, we'll see with our questions here, and we'll see if my poll everywhere decides to wake up. If not, we'll do it the old-fashioned way, and I'll just drag and drop, and we'll bring it back and forth. It'll work fine. So recycling fixes the basis. So let's just ask that question, true or false, and let's see if my thing is working. And it does not look like it is. So let's just go back over here to poll everywhere. And we'll just activate it the old-fashioned way.
You're getting some answers in the question box too.
Yep, and I see that in the question box. So I just answered it there, and I'll drag it over here. Okay, recycling fixes the base. Okay. And most people say false. Okay. 94% of you say false, and I would agree with you. And again, this is sometimes a matter of terminology. Recycling typically stays near the surface. When we start getting into the base, we usually call that reclamation or rehabilitation. And again, it's just a matter of making sure we understand what we're talking about. But recycling is reusing what's already there to some extent. And so it's really a false in this case. Recycling deals with the surface layers, normally asphalt, but you can actually recycle concrete, though we don't do it very often. Cold in place is fairly common here in New York State. I don't know how common it is in Ohio, but it certainly is a very commonly used thing here where you're using emulsion in place. You could do hot in place where you actually put down hot mix asphalt right back down. There's Midland mixed pavers and other tools for doing that. You could do a cold stockpile where you mill everything up, put in the stockpile, and you could actually technically do that with hot as well, where you take everything off. I like that technique, but the public doesn't always like the gravel on the surface while you're doing the work because you stockpile the asphalt out of the way. But slow fast does work pretty well. And then heater scarifier. Now, here's one. Let me just move out of the way so I can see your hands. They can give me responses back, right, Victoria? Or they can give me a hands up or something? Yep, they can. So if you
Yeah, they can
can,
raise their hand.
you could raise your hand and tell me if you've ever done a heater scarifier. Raise your hand if you've done heater scarifier. Doesn't look like a lot of people have. Got one, just a couple of you. It's an interesting technique, and it actually has its place. The idea behind the heater scarifier is you come in with essentially a big infrared heater, or it could be a propane heater. There's a couple of different types out there. But you essentially heat the asphalt surface up enough to where you come behind it with a scarifier. Now, this is an older one that looks more like a fancy York rake. The newer ones are a little bit more tooth looking, but it comes in right behind the heater and it blends everything back together. And yes, you can add fresh stone if you need to, or even some additional rejuvenator or emulsion or asphalt. And you essentially have a new pavement when you're done. It's essentially a good candidate when the problems are just superficial, when you've just got a cracking issue in the surface or a little bit of instability. It's just a surface mix problem or an age problem. New York State is starting to use it more and more on long stretches where they've got a good base underneath and it's a form of recycling. The biggest issue I see with heater scarifier is you have to go slow, much slower than sometimes you want to. You want to go fast, so you crank up the heat. If you crank up the heat on the asphalt, you burn the asphalt and you get a problem. You see smoke coming off the back, you're going to have a problem. So I want to know how old that picture is. That's from the 90s. The 1990s, not 1890s, but yeah, that picture is pretty old. Okay. Someone's going to be doing their first one after the holiday weekend. So make sure they go slow. It really does work well. And if you got vegetation near the edge, I hate to tell you this, but it may get burned. So just be aware of that fact. Got to go slow, but it's a good technique. Okay. Let's look at our next question. Calcium chloride stabilization reduces the fines, reduces the frost susceptibility, or reduces the fines and the frost susceptibility. So calcium chloride stabilization. This now we're getting full depth stuff. Which of those three is true? And again, I will come back over here to the old-fashioned way. And we'll go back. And we'll go to this one. And we'll activate. And why she's decided not to be embedded today, who knows? So calcium chloride stabilization reduces the fines, reduces the frost susceptibility, or reduces the fines and the frost susceptibility. Okay, we got a little bit of all. 3. That's okay. Doesn't bother me. I actually sort of like the idea that it's doing that. Okay. Okay, so you're about 50-50 in terms of what it does. Very few of you have mentioned just by itself reducing the fines content. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up there. And I'm going to talk about the actual answer here. And the answer, by the way, is calcium chloride stabilization. It's just adding a salt. If you've ever made ice cream, you've essentially seen the effect of what happens when you add a salt. It's not going to bind those fines up, so it doesn't do that. So really it reduces the frost susceptibility. The fines are still there. So if you've got too many fines, too much clay, too much silt, it's going to hold on to too much water. It's still going to be soft in the spring. Calcium chloride stabilization works best when you've just got a little too many fines, but they're not really causing you major drainage problems, but you are still having frost issues because you're up at 8 to 10%, maybe even a little bit more in terms of the amount of fines you've got. And what you're really worried about is that softening during spring thaw or January thaw. If you think about it from the standpoint of a pavement, what we're really trying to do for the base underneath the surface is we want the fines content to be as low as possible. We want about 50 to 70% gravel-sized particles and a little over a quarter to 40% sand-sized particles. What we really want to do is we want to be in this little black area here that's on my little drawing here. Okay, we want to be in here. And stabilization really works well, bringing us into that range by binding up the fines if you're using cement or asphalt. But with calcium, what you're really trying to do is something that's near the margins. It's not behaving quite as well as you'd like in the spring thaw period. You're along this border here. It works pretty well to reduce the frost susceptibility. And it does actually help control the moisture a little bit because of calcium actually pulls the moisture to it. So it gives them stability in that particular direction. And of course, a lot of our roads started out as gravel and we paved over the top of them. And the fines content was probably pretty good for a gravel surface, but not good for a gravel base. As a reminder with stabilization, it can be everything from just pulverizing what's already there, just blending it all in and you're done. That's what they're doing in this photograph. Okay. You could be doing mechanical stabilization, which is a fancy way of saying I'm going to just bring in some additional material and blend it in so that at the end of the day I'm in that spot on the chart. You could be doing chemical stabilization. Cement binds the actual fines. It actually cements them together to reduce the fines content. Lime works by hydrating with what's in your mixture. You can use fly ash with the lime to actually bind everything up together. You could bring lime in if you've got enough clay content to work with that, depending where you are in your area. You don't see a lot of lime here in New York, for instance, because we don't have a lot of plastic materials, and you really need some plastic materials to work with the lime. You could use asphalt, bituminous asphalt, just plain emulsion. That's up to about 12% fines. You can reduce it down and get it into the band you want to be in. You can actually foam it, which is actually pretty cool, where you actually foam the asphalt up and you blow into it with air pressure, like the old thing we used to do where we blew in a straw with our milk when we were in school. And you make foam, and that foam coats everything better. And so you can get away with a little bit higher level of asphalt in that particular case. And of course, you can actually do a combination, and that's actually done fairly often, where especially with bituminous, we add a little bit of cement to help it set up faster and help bind up a little bit of the fines. Which do we choose? Well, there's only one way to really know, and that's to do a test. You have to go and do a test to see what you've actually got, and then decide on what stabilizer to use and do full depth reclamation. You just can't full depth reclamation. It doesn't work. And again, it works fairly well. It's fairly efficient. This is a project we did back with when I had our old director. His name was Lynn Irwin, and we did a cement stabilization as part of our biggest event of the year, where we've had 500 people out on a road. But I want to remind you of something. When you're doing stabilization, the biggest rule is don't add any more stabilizer than you need. Extra asphalt, extra cement doesn't help you. In fact, if you add too much cement, the road begins to crack. If you add too much asphalt, you can get little balls of asphalt or asphalt emulsion, and that's not going to be stable. Don't add any extra. If the mix design says 4% or 2 gallons per cubic yard or whatever, go with that. Leave it alone. Don't add extra. That's the temptation we all fall into. It's an easy trap. Okay. So our next question, and I will make sure I've got poll everywhere going here. Doing nothing is a good maintenance technique. Is that true or is that false? Doing nothing is a good maintenance technique, and I've activated it. Doing nothing is a good maintenance technique. Well, most of you think the answer is false. Okay. So let's go in here. Actually, it's true. Doing nothing is a technique we actually use all the time. In fact, you're doing it right now. Sometimes it's better to not fix a roadway than to put a bad repair after a problem. Like for instance, this roadway right here. What would you do? You can't do an overlay. It's too late for crack repairs. Really what it needs is a full depth reclamation. So doing nothing may be the best of a bunch of bad choices. We really should have had good asset management to get ahead of this game, but once it gets to a certain point, sometimes it's better to leave it alone. So doing nothing is a technique, and it should actually be in our list of techniques. The nice thing about doing nothing is it's easy, it's definitely cheap, and you use it on both your good roads and your bad roads. Obviously, there's a roadway that's fairly new in terms of having maintenance on it. It just had a slurry seal the year before the photograph was taken. You're obviously not going to do anything on this particular roadway for a while. But part of your asset management is to make sure you look at every single roadway and figure out when you do need to do the maintenance. We do maintenance or preservation way too late most of the time. Do it sooner than you have to, but doing nothing is part of the game. So knowing you don't have to do anything is good. Okay. So let's see. I know I got a couple of notes here in the question and answer. Doing nothing may not be a popular technique from a PR perspective. Absolutely. I agree. And that's why it's so important to have an overall asset management plan so people see the reason we're doing nothing is because we have a plan to do a really good job in 2 or 3 years or whenever that might be. And yes, sometimes we have to do some minor repairs just to get us through. But what's worse PR-wise? Doing nothing and explaining why, or putting down an overlay that a year and a half later has failed. People may remember that. And, you know, our primaries were yesterday. And those who were voting in the primary, elected officials here, we have them as well as you do in Ohio. They remember that when they vote. So you want to keep that in mind. Okay, our next one. When my slide decides to wake up. While my slides go through, I will. Okay, so our next question is, the worker in the hole is obviously not a supervisor, is an OSHA inspector, or is not following good safety practice. And I will come over here to poll everywhere, and I'll activate the next one. And while that answer comes in, I'm going to reply here to your Q&A that you guys put in. Somebody put a note in here. Don't you consider seals and rejuvenators as part of construction? Joint seams should be sealed immediately. Rejuvenators have a limited window. Yes. Yes, any kind of rejuvenators or even emulsions need to be part of the overall construction process as well as the preservation process later on. The key is do the right repair, do it well. Whatever you decide to do, it is part of the process. Stage construction can be part of the process as well too. So yeah, I think everybody got this one right. This is a pretty easy one. I don't see why this is a problem. So yep. So I think everybody got this one. So we'll move on. They're not following good safety practices. This particular picture, and by the way, I cut the picture narrow. It's actually twice as wide, and it's got a lot more in it than even what you see in the photograph. We actually can spend 15 minutes just talking about the OSHA issues here. I'm not even going to get into them today, but I do want you to remind yourself to please stay safe. But while we're here, I want to talk about total reconstruction just a touch. And I know you're saying, but that's not preservation. No, it's not. But we have to make sure we understand total reconstruction is in our list of tools. It's very expensive, but it may be the only option. And at the end of it, you have a brand new road, okay? And so it's part of our overall plan. But then once you've reconstructed the road, you have to preserve what you've got. So once you've rebuilt the roadway, you make sure you have a preservation plan as part of that reconstruction. Nothing worse than building a brand new road and thinking it's going to last for 20 or 25 years. And it starts to fall apart because we didn't do the maintenance. We didn't do the preservation techniques that we should have done, okay? 811 must be called before any work, before using powered equipment that will dig, after hitting a utility line, or to report a non-emergency. And I will go over here to poll everywhere, and I will get that particular question and activate it. And my web speed is getting slow. Okay. Going to deactivate that. And why are we not seeing my folders? Don't you love it when that happens, Victoria?
It's like you have a little gremlin in your computer this morning, David.
It has definitely got a gremlin in the computer this morning. I have no idea why she's doing that. But hey, that's the way it goes. But here comes the poll everywhere. And somebody here has made a note. Also make sure that new pavement base and subgrade address the current conditions and problems and future traffic needs to the extent possible. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about that. That's something that I firmly believe in. And you're right. No doubt about that. So. Okay, I've activated the 811 must be called. Let's see what people say. Now this one, I know I will get different responses because I'm talking to folks in Ohio, because the rules in Ohio are different than they are in New York. And frankly, every state has its own different rules. So I expect to not get the same answer that I would get in New York, but let's just ask a couple of questions about that. So most of you said, about 2/3 of you said before any work, and about 1/3 of you said before using powered equipment that will dig into the ground. In the questions section, does somebody want to tell me what is the definition in Ohio?
It's before any work. Sorry.
But what defines work?
Anytime you're going to be working,
According to
that's a
your
good
standards,
question, David.
anytime you dig in the ground more than 12 inches. I looked it up.
Okay, good.
I always look that up. Yeah, somebody got it. In Michigan, it's the same. It says anytime you do more than 12 inches. Okay. In New York State, it's anytime you use powered equipment. Anytime you use powered equipment, it doesn't matter if you're into the ground 1 inch. What do I think? If you're not sure, call. Most of the time, you're better off to call, because you don't want to take that risk that somebody finds out the hard way that something happened that you didn't want to have happen. So know the rules within your own state and follow them as much as you possibly can, okay? In New York State, it would be before powered equipment. But yeah, in Ohio, it would be before you dig. But technically, it's anytime you're more than 12 inches. But this is why I'm like, please just call. Please be safe. You can see they actually did call in this particular case. There's the yellow mark. What's the yellow mark mean? Someone in the question thing want to tell me what the yellow mark means. Yeah, gas. Absolutely. What you see is a gas line on fire. they were doing reclamation work, full depth reclamation, but they were only going down about 9 inches. So technically, they weren't down a foot. But it's nice to know, if they'd properly marked it, that the line where it was. But instead, the line was in the road 9 inches down, and they hit it with the reclamation machine. The sad part is, in this particular case, this was the second reclamation machine for this one company in less than a month. In both cases, the operator didn't get off safely, and it happens, yeah, somebody said it happens more often than you think. I worked 8 years in Yates County, New York, which is, we have somebody here from Pinyan. So I was in Pinyan, New York for 8 years. And while I was there, we hit, I think, 8 different lines, if I remember correctly. Sewer is one of the ones you definitely don't want to hit. And all but one of those cases, they had marked the line incorrectly. Or in one case, they told us there was no water line there. We found the water line. So even if they marked them, please be careful. Please be very, very safe. Okay. The 3 most important things to remember when maintaining a road. Okay. The 3 most important things to remember when maintaining a road. Let's see here what you guys think. And in this particular case, you can put in any word that you want to put in. So what are the 3? So you can put in 3 different words, and we'll see what happens. What are the 3 most important things to remember when maintaining a road? And again, I'll watch the Q&A if you want to put it in there instead. Drainage treatments. Drainage is coming up to the top. What the cause is, the cost, the effectiveness, what's the traffic? Yeah. Okay. Some good answers here. Age, traffic. But you'll notice that the top item that's coming up is drainage. Cost is right behind it. Yeah, okay, I can live with any of those choices. Okay. The idea is, when we're looking at a road where there's lots of things to remember, and we actually talk about quite a bit what the 3 most important things are when maintaining a road. Okay. We jokingly like to say the only 3 things that matter are drainage, drainage, and drainage. Okay. And I do agree, drainage is key. You've got to have good drainage. If you don't have that, almost nothing else is going to last as long as you want. And drainage does not just include your culverts and your floods and stuff like that. It includes the quality of your gravel. It includes the subsurface water, like we saw in the other pictures earlier in the session. Drainage is key. If somebody really wants me, my top 3 are drainage, communications, and safety, and not necessarily in that particular order. So we jokingly say drainage, drainage, and drainage, but I actually put long before cost. I worry about safety, and I worry about how we communicate that information to the public and among ourselves. Okay. Sealing. Okay, definitely a preservation technique. Sealing is used for cracks that are non-working. Is that true or is that false? And again, I'll bring up our friend Poll Everywhere. And I'll activate it. And there you go. Sealing is used for cracks that are non-working. Wow, it's almost a 50-50 split. And again, this may just be an issue of nomenclature or jargon, and people just trying to make sure they're on the same page for things. So let's keep that. And I've got some people putting there a B, a true, a false. So a little bit of a variety of things. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation and let's look at what the answer is. The answer is false. Okay, we like to call it crack sealing. A lot of times that's the term we use, but the reality is crack repairs as a general category come in 2 different flavors: sealing and filling. Sealing a crack is to prevent the intrusion of water and debris, and so we have to use something that's flexible, a rubberized material, a silicone, something like that, that's got flexibility to it, moves back and forth. Filling, on the other hand, is just a crack that's not moving back and forth with temperature. That one, we're just trying to reduce the infiltration of the water, and if possible, we can actually reinforce the pavement because we can use something stiffer, like an actual asphalt or an asphalt emulsion that becomes asphalt when the water evaporates, and it gives us some strength. You can't do that with a ceiling crack because it's got to have that flexibility. So you got to know what you're doing, and then how you fill it. Do you just flush fill? Do you do some overbanding, but you're going to be worried about the snowplow? Or do you actually bring in a router or a saw and you make a reservoir? For sealing, I definitely like having a reservoir for the material. If you're going to overband, just make sure it's not too thick, otherwise the plow can go over the top of it. The biggest thing with crack repairs is pick good candidates, not the one on the left, and do it properly, not the one on the right. What happened obviously on the right is they didn't clean it properly and it didn't stick. You got to clean the crack out. A heat lance or an air compressor that's got a proper oil water separator is a minimum. Get it dry, get it clean, and don't do it when it's going to rain. But good candidate selection is the biggest issue with cracks. Okay, this isn't a good candidate. This is even worse. I'd rather, again, we talked about doing nothing. I'd rather do nothing than this. This particular town or township was doing $30,000 a year of crack repair. Well, they weren't getting their money's worth. They'd be better off to spend that $30,000 on almost anything else. It is, yeah, truly a waste of money. So they stopped, they came back, and they reset their whole crack repair program after we looked at this particular roadway. Okay, so crack repair needs to be part of your toolkit, but definitely do it well. The most cost-effective patching technique is throw and go, throw and roll, semi-permanent, or spray patch. Okay, so let's bring up our friend Mentimeter, or not Mentimeter, Pole EV. I'm thinking I'm in Ohio there, Victoria.
We would always be happy to have you here.
I know. We're definitely going to be there when we get to our national meeting in Ohio. I like going to Columbus. It's a great town. Most cost-effective patching technique: throw and go, throw and roll, semi-permanent, or spray patch. Let's see what y'all say. Okay, and we got people, I got a D in there, so that would add to the spray patch. Okay. Okay, we've got quite a variety. Over half of you said spray patch, throw and roll, semi-permanent, get a few, and I got a couple for throw and go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the proper answer is here. The answer is, well, truth be told, if you actually do the math carefully, any of them that are not throw and go are cost effective. You can actually show that the throw and roll technique, which I'm going to show you here in just a second to remind you of the steps, is a little bit more cost effective. But that little bit difference isn't great. It's actually surprisingly less than you might think. The key is, if you're going to do patching, pick the right technique and do it well. And the reason the throw and roll needs to be in our toolkit is because we have to do it in the winter. We have to do it in some really nasty weather. And it can be very cost effective, but please be safe when you're doing it. But what we're really trying to do is fill potholes. Potholes are formed by a combination of traffic and water. You don't get potholes if you don't have traffic. You don't get potholes if you've got a well-maintained, good roadway. But you got to fill those potholes up. Throw and go, it sounds really easy. You drive down the road, you throw the patch in, and the traffic will finish the compaction. This particular roadway is one I can walk to go to work. When I'm in my office, I actually walk right by this spot. And about 10 years ago, maybe 12 now, there was one winter right before they did some reconstruction a couple of years later, where they tried to patch this. 3 different agencies actually tried to patch this. It was really sort of almost a comedy of errors. All 3 times they did the same thing. They took some cheap cold patch and they threw it. Oh, Thank you for reminding me. My poll is covering my screen. They tried to fill this patch up 3 times with just throw the patch in, have the traffic compact it. It doesn't happen. They just threw it back out of the hole. You can actually see the patch here along the curb line. Each time, less than 24 hours later, that patch was back in the side of the roadway. Didn't work. So do me a favor, if you're going to patch well. Throw and roll is one of my favorite techniques. It works well. But semi-permanent, where you box it out when the plants are open, that works. And spray patch with a spray patch truck, that works really well too. Pick a good technique and use it. If you're going to do throw and roll, you can sweep the hole out. With modern mixes with polymers, it's actually not as critical as you think. They're actually designed to work with the water already in the hole. But if there's a lot of water in there, it's good to get some of the excess out. You throw your patch material in, a little extra isn't going to hurt, because when you're done, you roll over it with your truck tire, and that truck tire actually activates the polymer. And to do it right, you want it slightly above the surface, but not much. Okay, obviously if it's too high, the plows are going to take it right back off. But if you do this properly, that patch should last. You should have 80 to 90% of your patches last for the whole season. And it can work even on a gravel road. I've actually used these polymer patches on gravel roads, and it actually works. But the key is get that truck, roll over it, and your truck tires actually help activate the polymer. So pick a good technique and do it well. Okay. All wearing courses, surface treatments, chip seals, but chip seals is just one of the many wearing courses. Do which of the following? Waterproof the pavement, restore skid resistance, restore the oxidized surface, and true and level minor ruts. And let's go back over here to our Poll Everywhere page. And once it comes up, this one, by the way, you can multiple replies, so you can actually click more than one. So you can pick on all 4 if you want. You can pick on 2. You can pick on 3. Let's see. You can actually pick more than one. At least it's supposed to let me do that. Okay. So everybody likes waterproofing the pavement. Some people also like restoring the skid resistance. Some people like restoring the oxidized surface. And a couple of you say true and level minor ruts. Okay. Well, this is actually probably a pretty good time to start thinking about what the answer is. Okay. And of course, it won't let you do the multiple replies. That's a particular one that for some reason me and Poll Everywhere fight each other on it. Mentimeter seems to do a better job on that one, Victoria. I don't know why. But the answer, by the way, is they all waterproof the pavement. That's actually one of their primary purposes, to help keep the water from percolating down through. They all restore the skid resistance, okay? And they all help with the oxidization from the sun. That's their primary purpose, in fact. They're like painting your house, which I need to do on mine. But they don't fill ruts, with some exceptions. And the reason I didn't just take this one off is some of them do, but only a couple, and they're specialized. And they have something in common, the ones that do. So if you look at it from the standpoint of choices, and we'll look at the most common chip seals to thin overlays, and we'll look at the choices of waterproofing to true and leveling, they all waterproof. They all do skid resistance, but only the micropaving and the Nova chip true and level. And even then, we're talking a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch maximum. And generally, you have to do that in 2 passes if you're going to try to true and level. A thin overlay will not. Again, unless you have a rut box specifically for that purpose. The reason that the micropave and the Nova chip actually can fill the ruts is they were designed with a polymer, and that polymer helps hold everything in place. And so you can actually fill some minor ruts with a micropave or with a Nova chip or a paver paste surface treatment if you prefer. Okay. The micropaving was actually originally developed to be used on the German Autobahn, which is why it's very effective. And so here's micropaving, here's the pay-per-play surface treatment, which does have, it's hot mix, so it does have actually a tack coat. There's a tack coat right in front, right here, at the very front of the paving head. It looks like a paver because it really is. It's just one stone thick. One of the reasons I like this photograph is actually you can see they did the crack repairs about 3 to 4 months before they did the Nova chip, which is a good idea. Give it some time to cure out the crack repair and then come along with your Nova chip on top of it. And when you're done, you've got your pretty darn good surface, okay? The emulsion is brown before it breaks because it's a bad photo or because the stone is brown. And again, because we're going to do it this way, we'll activate that question. Okay, so we'll see. Why is the emulsion brown? And almost everybody is getting it. That's good. Yep. Almost everybody is saying before it breaks. The couple of people in the Q&A are saying A as well. Okay. And sure enough, emulsion is brown before it breaks. So behind your slurry machine, the emulsion should have a brown color to it. Whether it's as light brown as this is a fairly light emulsion. It's normally a little darker than that. It looks almost like a chocolate pudding brown. But that's the color, because what you've really got is an emulsion. Whenever you're doing a slurry seal or a chip seal or a sand seal, it's an emulsion of asphalt and water, and they're held together in suspension. And as long as they're held together, the color is brown. When it breaks into its two components, it's going to be asphalt and water, it turns black. And the problem is, once it's turned black, it's no longer going to be as sticky. It's not going to grab onto those stones as well. So keep that in mind, that really you want to get your stones on before the emulsion breaks. And with a chip seal or a sand seal, that can be very, very risky. This is a photograph that I used to use in a lot of training on doing chip seals and sand seals. It was from the FHWA, and it was in black and white, the only version I had. I got the color version and realized there was a problem. Look at the color of that emulsion. It's black. If it's black, it's almost bad idea even to put the stones on it, though you almost have to now. But you're probably going to have to come back and fix it. You've got to get the stones down while the emulsion is brown. This distance between the distributor and the spreader is really key. Keep it short. The shorter is better. With a rapid set, you might have as few as 30 seconds to get those stones down, okay? And then, of course, you can roll them into place. Somebody noticed in here, may stay brown for a while if placed in a cooler weather for microsurfacing or chip seal. Yeah, the factors that affect how long it breaks is whether it's a rapid set, a medium set, or a slow set. We're not going to use slow set on a chip seal, obviously. The weather makes a difference. Humidity can make actually quite a bit of difference. Wind can actually do a difference because it helps essentially cause evaporation on the surface, whether you're in the shade or not in the shade. The big thing is be consistent, get the stones down while it's brown so that the stones will stick, okay? Because you definitely don't want to lose those stones. You'll get bleeding, and bleeding is really hard to fix. Okay, so which is not a cause of pavement distress? Okay, and actually I think in this case I'll just go straight to the poll everywhere and bring that up. And we activate. So what is not a cause of pavement distress? Traffic, temperature, excess moisture, age, or possums? Now, yes, I know I'm being a little bit sarcastic with possums, though I'll be honest with you, we actually had a culvert one time that settled on us about 3 feet because of woodchucks. They started digging into the bank after we'd rebuilt it, and they actually caused the whole road to settle on us. So I suppose in that particular case, it wasn't possums, but it was critters that caused that. But the reality is almost everything can lead to some pavement distress. So, if you look at the list of things that can cause pavement distress, traffic obviously is the big one, especially trucks. Temperature can make a huge difference. Hotter weather can cause buckling. Really cold can cause cracking in the winter. Excess moisture, that's obviously a problem. Age, over time, it's going to break down. Nothing we can do about that. Okay, so we just have to keep that in mind. It's definitely not possums, though. Of course, got to have a little bit of humor. So we have the famous photograph from the Arizona DOT of "Not My Problem." Yes, this is a real photograph. We've got several of them ourselves, and they're easy to find. But the thing I want you to remember is there's lots of things to look at. When it comes to pavement distress, there's all kind of cracking, there's rutting, there's corrugations, potholes, raveling, polishing of the aggregate if you've got an aggregate that's got too much limestone or shale that doesn't even hold up. Look at the distresses and let them tell you what the repair should be. You might have to do a test pit to look underneath, but at the end of the day, you need to fix the cause of the distress, not the effect. What's causing the distress? So our last question, okay. Oh, somebody asked about that previous picture, by the way. Yeah, it was an earthquake damage. It was actually a slope stability problem. There was a minor earthquake and the whole slope failed. That's where that comes from. It's from California. So what is the best pavement preservation technique? And I will bring up the poll everywhere and let people put in their answer. In this case, you can do what's called a wall. So you can put in multiple words. So what is the best pavement preservation technique? It depends. Yeah, it does depend. Okay. Let's see, asset management. I'm a huge fan of asset management. Having a good asset management program can save your tail. Yeah. You want to do routine or preserving techniques? Yep, it depends. Yeah, absolutely depends on the situation. So what was that technique I told you earlier? Get in early? Yeah, we tend to do these too late. Depends again. Yep. Lots of different answers out there. The right solution for the particular failure. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And that comes back to that answer that we saw earlier today. And this is the definition from the National Center for Pavement Preservation. It's the right treatment at the right place at the right time. Okay? If you just remember that'll give you the right technique for pavement preservation. It'll help you with asset management, and it'll help you with public relations, with explaining to people why you're doing a particular activity, when you're doing a particular activity. We probably don't really want to be doing something like we've got in this Frank and Ernest cartoon that'll pop up here in just a second, where it says we have to move the potholes again. Some motorists have memorized their locations. And we got to thank Mr. Thaves for letting us share this cartoon with you. With that, there's my email address. I'm more than willing to answer any questions people have. If you do, you can put them in the question. I'll hang on here for a few seconds. And otherwise, everybody have yourself a great day. And we'll go from there.
Thank you, David. As always, excellent.
Well, we got to fight with technology, and we think we clubbed it in the head, but.
Yeah, at least it's better than the one time when we'd put the question up and then we couldn't get the screen to come back up. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
It's always something. So, and you're getting kudos in the question box too.
I see that. I see that. Yep. Can we provide a PDF of the presentation? Probably the best thing, actually. Let me just see here. Can I send it? Yeah, I can. Let me do this. Let's see if I've got it still. I'm going to put in to the Q&A what's actually in the chat pod. I put in a link to our pavement maintenance workbook, which really could be a pavement preservation workbook. We called it pavement maintenance because, again, it was just a word. It has in there almost everything we talked about and focuses on some of the pavement preservation techniques, but talks a lot about the distresses and lists all the different repairs. So I would actually go there, download that book. And that's going to have a
David,
lot of,
if you wouldn't mind, if you could email it over to me and then I'll send it out to at least our
absolutely.
DOT folks, because
Sure.
it had a security level 2 risk when I clicked on that link because it's in
Oh no.
box. I know.
It's a box. Okay. Do you want me to send you the actual PDF?
Yeah, that would be great. And then I'll share
Okay.
it out with everybody.
I'll
So
send the actual PDF. Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. Got
All right.
somebody's technology. Ooh,
I
scary,
know.
scary. That's okay.
Well, thank you everyone for your time today. And it
Yep.
looks like we're not having any questions to come in. And so we'll go ahead and wrap things up. As always,
Okay.
it's been a pleasure, David. We really appreciate your time.
Not a problem. Thanks, Victoria. Everybody have
Thank you.
yourself a great day and stay cool this weekend.
Yes, definitely, everybody. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.